Welcome to another American Homesteaders tutorial video. This one's going to be on making jerky, and as always with the American Homesteader, we have different methods from extremely simple to going complete. And in the case of jerky, we're going to go with kind of a middle of the road. We're going to use a Nesco dryer. We're going to use some prepackaged jerky mix that will probably spice up a little bit for our own needs. And we just had the meat market go ahead and slice it about 1/8 of an inch thick for jerky. So we're not putting a lot of effort into the preparation. We're going to just add the flavoring and dry it out. Now, it's important to note that jerky is a common term in America, in the United States, for a dried meat product, but all parts of the world have dried meat, fish, vegetables, and fruits for thousands of years. Biltong is a common product out of South Africa, for instance, where they take a thicker cut of beef, season it, and air dry it. There's really no smoke flavor to it. The jerky tends to be a thinner cut of meat, but it has to be a lean meat. You don't want any fat. Fat will dry out, but it'll get a rancidity to it. So if there's any fat in your meat, you want to make sure you get that cut out. It's actually the cheaper cuts of meat that make the best jerky. And then the method we're using is pretty, like I said, middle of the road. You could also take it, and if you're in an arid enough climate, you could air dry your meat outside. Just put some salt on it. We'll go into some of these other methods at different times. But another method is to smoke it over open fire. Now, usually this is a method that's used with beef, wild game, very lean cuts of meat, and then like for drying pork, it's a whole different method which we'll go into later. One of the things that we do here at the American Homesteader, and this is optional for each person, and you have to do that's kind of the point of this. You do these things how you want to. We'll give you several different options as how to do things, but one of the things we usually do whenever we're curing meat, like if you will refer back to our summer sausage video, we do use nitrites. And there is some controversy over whether nitrites, I said that is a preservative, that is the preservative. But I look at it this way. What we're doing is very safe. You're going to get all the moisture out. Bacteria can't grow, can't exist. There's salt added. We've created a harsh environment. But that extra step of safety has saved people's lives over the years. And you have to look at the benefits and the negative benefits to that, or the negative response. And to me, it's a lot. I'd rather err on the side of safety and feel like the product that I'm making is going to be shelf stable and that I'm not going to contaminate myself or my family. That's my choice. You have to make your own choices, but that's just the way we happen to do it here. And we'll probably describe other ways to do things, but it doesn't necessarily come with a recommendation. I would recommend using nitrites. Now I'm going to show you our food prep area. Okay, I've gone ahead and trimmed the meat. This is just a small portion of it, and there's a difference between things that you have to do in order to get a product and preferences. And this is one of those things. I prefer to cut these into smaller strips. These slices that's about the average size, but I like them a little bit smaller than that. And I don't know if you can see this on the video or not, but see the grain of the meat? We had ours cut with the grain. You can have it cut against the grain or across the grain. The difference is this gives you a chewier jerky. The other way, it breaks apart easier. And in another video we'll also show you can make very good jerky out of ground meats too. And we've done that many times. There's, again, it's mostly preferences. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. The ground beef is obviously easier to chew, and it's faster. You don't have to leave the marinade set for a long period of time. But we also trimmed off most of the fat. There wasn't a lot. And when you get a eye round or top round or something like that, that's a leg primal cut. So there's not going to be a lot of fat on it, but you don't want fatty pieces of meat. And you also don't want to get the this is an inexpensive cut of meat, but don't look for the, last expiration date. You want to get it as fresh as you can. In our particular case, I live in Indiana, in central Indiana, and finding locally raised and prepared meat is not very difficult. It may be harder in your area, but I would try to source out as fresh a meat as possible. Because the better your ingredients going in, the better your product at the end is going to be, and that's true of everything. And the other thing, and you'll hear me say this over and over and over, your preparation is crucial. I know I laid out a presentation for you to see, but I do that whether I'm doing a video on something or not. It's so important to have all your ingredients, all your bowls, and everything out in front of you. That way nothing is mixed. I pre-measure everything. I know I showed it in the bowl, the seasoning, but I do that all the time just so that I know when that bowl is empty, it's been used. And I'll put the water in pre-measured bowls, put it in, and we'll go through that. It's just, if you miss an ingredient, it could be disastrous. Or if you put in too much of something, it can be really bad. And that's happened in the past. That's why I don't do that. And remember, this is all by weight. You have to weigh everything out. The proportions and the ratios between the cures and the meat is important. I mean, you'd be better with a little more than a little less, but you really need to keep it as close to what they recommend as possible. And that's why I've got some pretty precision scales to measure things out, especially like the cures. That's down into grams, and like there, I think it's 19.3 grams of cure for the one, and then the seasonings themselves are not as important, but the cure is extremely important. You want to make sure you have that right. Okay, like I had mentioned earlier, we're using prepackaged mixes. This is Nesco. It is prepackaged in 1 pound servings, and it has the seasoned mix and the cure in actually 2 different packets. I think you can probably see that, 2 different pouches. Those will be mixed together and added to the jerky. We're also using a second type. This is High Mountain. It comes in a bulk package, and one of the reasons I'm using that, since it's already in a bulk, we don't have an even increment of meat. We have 15.246 pounds. So these are 1 pound. So we got 2.46 pounds of the bulk package mix, which we weighed out. And again, this is me. I don't like to guess at the weights and stuff, so I use some pretty accurate measurements and scales down into grams and so forth, so that I know exactly how much of each thing is going into it. Of course, the next item that's added to this is just water, and you just use plain water, mix it up, and when we get done with the marinade, you'll see that the water is pretty much soaked up into the meat, which brings us to the third and probably the most important part of the whole thing, and that's the meat. This is the top round here. As you can see, it's very lean meat, but there is a little bit of fat here, which we'll trim off of there and pull off any little bits of fat off of the meat, because to have the best jerky, which is not like summer sausage or something. Summer sausage, you want a little bit of fat in it for flavor, but this has got to be shelf stable and stable at room temperature, and if the fat will oxidate and it will get an off taste. It doesn't mean it's going to cause you to get sick. It's just that the flavor will really go downhill. I think it's interesting too, is talking about the flavoring and stuff, that things like jerky that we've learned to like so much is actually derived from the cures that were done to preserve the meat. I think originally they weren't really adding the smoke flavor for the flavor's sake. It was to keep insects away while they're curing the meat, and they happened to enjoy the flavor. Most Western type of smokes are either a fruit wood or like hickory or something like that. Those are wood smoke flavors that we happen to like, and they also have preservatives in them too. But I think from my reading and research, really the main reason of using smoke was to repel insects, and most insects like flies and stuff don't like the smell of smoke. It probably tells them there's fire close by, so they stay away from it. But now we're going to go ahead and mix everything up, and then we'll get back with you and show you how we have the prepared marinade and put it in the refrigerator. Okay, we've got our mixes ready to go here. This is our High Mountain hickory flavor. This is our Nesco. I think it's apple and garlic.
Just original.
It's just the original blend. And the proportions are a little bit different because the amounts of meat and also the recommendations of each company. What I'm going to do is take these and mix them in. And one thing to kind of keep in mind, and again when you're using the nitrites, is they don't really readily dissolve, so you kind of have to stir it. Alright, everything's all sliced up, and I'm getting ready to add the cure. As we remember, we sliced this into small pieces already. Now I'm going to take this and begin to mix this in. I'm going to do it in small amounts so that I make sure I get a good cure on everything. Best way to do this is just get your hands in there and start moving stuff around and make sure everything gets coated really well. You don't have to really take every piece apart, but you want to make sure that the marinade gets down inside of everything. And as it's added to, it's going to obviously soak up more and more. Add another chunk in, another bit of our cure, stir, 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 add it in, mix. Just kind of mixing with your fingers, massage it in there. It'll all get evenly distributed through the slices. And I'm going to do that with both of the cures. And then after that, we're going to wrap it up. We'll show you how we do that, and then it's going to sit for at least 24 hours. Here's our two different batches of meat. This is the High Mountain. This is the Nesco. They got a little bit darker because of the cure mix and the spices. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take saran wrap and we're going to cover each one of these, and I'm going to kind of put the saran wrap down on top of it. And that's to kind of keep oxygen out of it. This does need to go in the refrigerator. You can't leave this out. It's cured, but it certainly is not shelf stable right now. So I'm going to just take a piece of saran wrap here. Happens to be Glad. Any plastic wrap will do that you like to work with. And I'm going to put this not so much on the bowl, but on the meat. And I'm going to kind of tuck that in around it, push it down in. And just as a note here, I don't think I'm going to record this, but tonight, later on, this is mid-morning where we're at right now, we'll probably take the wrap off and turn the meat over in the bowls, and we'll do that again in the morning. So just make sure that we have a good distribution of the cure in there and that we get an even type of flavor on everything. This is going to get pushed down, and tomorrow we'll take note in case I forget to remind you, but any liquid that is in here is probably going to get soaked up into meat. So there you go. We've got our two bowls ready. They're going to go in the refrigerator overnight. It looks like it's 11 o'clock now, so somewhere around 11 or 12 o'clock tomorrow we'll start drying it out. It takes about 4 hours per batch, and we'll get into that a little bit more specific. This is going to be more than one batch. There's quite a bit of meat here. So we're going to be doing this throughout the day. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Okay, here we are. This is day 2, and the meat is marinated overnight. It's actually been a little over 24 hours now. And what I've got my two bowls here. This is the High Mountain. This is the Nesco Original. And I'm just going to show you real quickly how to lay this out on the trays. The important thing is you want to make sure that all of your slices are laid out flat, because that's going to determine how it dries. If it's folded over itself, it's going to take longer to dry, and if you don't have a good dry, you're inviting bacteria in. If you get bacteria, you can basically poison yourself, and we don't want that to happen. So this is a very thin sliced meat. I'm thinking it's going to take 3 to 4 hours to dry, and you know, if your meat's twice as thick, you can kind of anticipate it's going to take twice as long to dry. So it's all dependent on what your preferences are, how thick you want your jerky, and you just want to make sure that it's thoroughly dry. If there's no water, bacteria can't live. It's just like any other living organism that we know about. It has to have water, and if there's no water, there's no bacteria. If there is, of course, like I said, I use nitrites too, which helps, but that doesn't assure that there won't be any bacterial growth. So that's the whole idea of drying. That's why it was an early preserving method. Early man figured out if you hang stuff out in the sun long enough, it'll dry out and will no longer decompose. Okay, here we are. It's been 4 hours now that the beef has been in the dryer, and there's your beef jerky. I have this layered in the 2 different types. This is the original here, and I'm putting the jerky on paper towels. This is optional, but as you can see here, there's a little bit of oil, even though this is extremely lean. And I like to kind of soak up all that oil. The oil is the only thing that's going to kind of go rancid or bad, and it probably won't be around long enough to really be a concern. But basically, you can see here how thin that is. This is an extremely thin jerky. That's kind of the way we like to do it. It cuts down your drying time too. It's very crisp and very good. So I'm just going to continue this process, and then I'll have some final comments when we're all done. This isn't our entire batch. This is just the first round here. We're going to kind of wrap this video up. But we have the dried product in these ball mason jars, and we're going to put a cap on it. And this is you can leave this out for probably a week or so. My guess is it won't last that long. If you're going to do a longer term storage, you want to probably put it in a freezer bag and throw it in the freezer so that a little bit of fat in there doesn't go rancid. But one thing I can assure you, you got your personal preferences and stuff, and whatever kind of things you come up with, I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And the proof is in the tasting, and got some good stuff there. I hope this inspires you to try this yourself. The biggest compliment I could have on anything is that you learn something and that you try something. I don't care so much as you succeed or fail. I failed at a lot of things. A lot of times you just keep trying it and keep it up, and you'll get exactly what you want the way you want it. And just enjoy life.